Everyone kind of enjoys a little bit of trash talk, whether that be the players themselves or the fans, but usually it gets kind of out of hand in the League of Legends space. But I also think that both the players and the fans just aren't ready for trash talk, nor is it as great as it naturally could be. So, if we go all the way back in time to where trash talk was kind of one of the biggest subjects at the time, was back when Doublelift made the statement that you should trash talk before the game and not after the game. Now, I actually did that interview and it just completely exploded on Reddit, and it even made like the front page of, r/all. And when I did that interview with Doublelift, that was actually a question that I had pre-done, asking him about trash talk, because Jensen had trash talked TSM back in 2017 before the matches actually happened. So this was kind of to get his opinion on trash talk, as it were, because it was popular at the time for Jensen to start to do trash talk before the match even or after the match actually even happened. So hence why that interview blew up. But I actually think what's crazy about that is that ever since then, Jensen has kind of been hated by the community for doing trash talk, and he was actually one of the original trash talkers back in the day. But there seems to be like this weird narrative, along with him just being obviously the first or second best mid laner, that you pick which one that you want, whether that be Bjergsen or Jensen. But because of that feud, that has always kind of distilled and boiled down to, well, I hate Jensen because he trash talks, but that's just a occlusion for, no, I actually just like Bjergsen and he's my favorite mid laner. So hence, I'm going to use this as a scapegoat to then attack Jensen. So trash talk has always kind of been this scapegoat to kind of hate on a player even more, because now you feel like you have justification as a fan or even as another player yourself in the League of Legends space. Another instance of people hating on a player that trash talked was Perks. Back at the very beginning of his career, he actually used to he started trash talking at the very beginning. And of course, him being a very good player right out the fucking gate, he could back all of that up. But now Western fans hate him. And they actually hate him because, he was considered cocky or whatnot, coming out and talking shit to, even some like legendary players and things like that. And of course, the trash talking LCS and shit. So he's always been hated by a lot of Western fans, but they'll always scapegoat it and they'll say, oh, Perks is washed and Perks was never really that good and, he never actually styled on people or anything. When in fact, none of that shit is true. He did style on everyone once he got into the league. He was basically Caps before Caps was even a thing. And so people kind of like to retcon history and then just use the trash talk that a player is actually known for and then retrofit that and put it against them for, throughout time, which is why trash talk is so misused within League of Legends. You could even go towards something like that's not even a player, right? With Carlos. And no, I'm not talking about Carlos nowadays where he's into fucking crypto and shit in Saudi Arabia or whatever. But back in the day, Carlos used to actually be hated a lot because he would trash talk. And now people are using the justification of, I'm not going to say that it's justified of him saying a lot of the things that he does say currently online. But before that, people would use justification of hating Carlos because, oh, he used to trash talk my team or he trash talk North America or whatever. Let me use that as an excuse to then, start talking shit about whatever it is that he's currently talking about, right? So I don't think largely one of the big problems with trash talking within League of Legends is the fact that I don't think esports fans know how to use trash talk to be just entertained by itself. And I think one of the biggest issues is not necessarily Western fans. I'm sorry to say this, but I'm grouping all of fucking Europe as, the Western fans. But in all reality, I actually think it's North American fans that don't know how to be just esports fans in terms of trash talking. And that is a reflection of what you can see within even their solo queue. Riot had talked about developing their solo queue and basically how every solo queue is different in terms of what words trigger, say, chat restrictions or, inappropriate behavior type punishments and things like that. And so every region naturally can set up their own kind of filters necessarily to where the system will trigger whether it sends out a ban or sends out a chat restriction. And it's very notorious that North America has a very low threshold for getting chat restrictions or anything like that. So there's a lot of behavior that is deemed unacceptable in North America in order to get chat restricted. Versus in Europe, we all know that Europe, EU West, you can shit talk a fuck ton and not get banned at all. So you can even see this in the reflection of solo queue itself, in the player base itself, and what they view acceptable as far as trash talk is concerned in their own fucking games. So what are they going to think about within, the League of Legends esports sphere and what is acceptable within them? Obviously, there's going to be a bleed over. And I think just additionally, trash talk has kind of changed with the invention of social media. So it's not necessarily, I would place the blame solely on North America or, just the Care Bear land of solo queue. Trash talk has largely just changed itself by way of social media, because back in the day, you could trash talk and say within traditional sports, for instance, you could trash talk and it would just be either on the court, say we're talking about basketball or something, or it would be during interviews, during a broadcast, within ESPN, or, it would be on the news or whatnot of trash talking. But it would never actually be directly the players interacting with each other necessarily, or on social media to where all the fans can obviously weigh in and you see all the fan reactions and shit like that. It was more so you just kind of talk with your buddies at the bar or whatnot. Now trash talk has changed to where you comment directly to the person trash talking the other player. So now everybody sees it. So that has changed the landscape, or I guess the tolerance, to where now esports players, especially considering that esports itself, everyone is just terminally fucking online. So obviously a lot of these players aren't going to be able to resist reading all the comments and shit like that. So trash talk itself really has changed fundamentally based on social media. So that has to be taken into, the aspect of all of this. Now, most trash talk is actually kind of shit. Whenever I read any trash talk of esports players talking about it, usually it's pretty fucking bad on Twitter. It's something pretty general and kind of obsequious, and really it can apply to anybody. And it's usually surface level, and it's the most obvious things like, oh, this guy's a one trick, right? If you're talking about APA or something, or, oh, this guy, is a new player. Like, of course he's going to get fucking nerves going against me, whatever, right? It's like the most surface level shit. And what's kind of funny is the fact that esports, and particularly with Twitter, and one of the advantages of social media itself, right? I talked about the disadvantage of it. The advantage of it is actually players get to sit there and actually premeditate what they're going to say, right? It's not like there's a microphone right in front of your face asking exactly what you want to say or trash talk the other player. It's you literally get to go before the game, you get to think of exactly what you're going to say, and you could come up with some banger ass lines, but for some reason, none of these players are actually able to do that. And you could even think of things like within history of just, okay, what is this player's backstory? What exactly is his champion pool? What is his play style? What is he actually known for? Maybe the region that he comes from, right? Or the language that he speaks or whatever. You could go off of a multitude of different things in order to flame this player. But instead, you just kind of come off the cuff with it on Twitter when you could have just premeditated it and do a sort of pre-written kind of thing. Now, I think one good area that people could take examples from of actual good trash talk is the epitome of good trash talk, which is battle rap, right? So back in the day, I used to watch a lot of battle rap. In fact, there's a battle rap league called King of the Dot. Now, King of the Dot is a Canadian rap battle league that actually still goes on today, in fact. But oftentimes what rappers would do is they would do research on the other rapper that they're about to battle. So you would get like some really marquee names battling each other and doing research about their previous battles. One big instance that I can think of is Arsenal versus Pat Stay. So Arsenal is like this black guy who, grew up in America. And then there's Pat Stay, who comes from Canada. He's like this tall white guy, kind of big. But one of the funny things that Pat Stay did in this battle of Arsenal versus Pat Stay, and this is like a huge fucking battle, right? Like, think of like a AAA fucking UFC fight or some shit like that, right? Like Anderson Silva versus, I don't know, whoever the fuck, right? I don't watch UFC at all. But think of something big like that. So Arsenal and Pat Stay would come up with dope ass lines like, yo, this guy's a fucking bus driver, yet he's talking about busing clips and shit. And it's true. Arsenal was actually a bus driver. And so it makes it even funnier, right? And so he draws from clues and different rhymes and shit that Arsenal has said in the past, and he draws it up now. You think of even what currently is going on, and kind of why I thought of this too as well, is Kendrick versus Drake, right? Obviously, Kendrick is bringing in real research about Drake's life and what Drake has done in the past and what he's maybe known for and bad things about Drake himself. And, it's getting a little bit fucking personal with, these two, the songs that they're releasing and shit like that. But Kendrick is going really fucking hard on this shit. And Drake is kind of doing kind of surface level rhymes and shit. And like, yeah, his music and his notes and shit are pretty good. I'm not saying that Drake's song necessarily was bad, but certainly Kendrick's is more personal, and he's done more research about Drake than Drake has done about Kendrick, it seems. So one thing in one scene, let's draw it back to esports, that I noticed, which has way fucking better trash talk within just the entire entire esports landscape, is obviously the FGC. The FGC has crazy fucking trash talk. Part of it is because of the format. They're after a round or something, within Street Fighter or whatever, you get to start the next round, obviously, and there's a little bit of a pause between that. And so you get to talk your shit. Well, on top of that, you have to think a lot of the FGC has huge amounts of black culture. In fact, there's a lot of black players, probably because it's console, and console is cheaper, and obviously, the fundamental like economic disparity and shit like that. But besides that, it just seems like FGC itself has a lot of black culture within it, and black culture is all about being braggadocious, right? It's about braggadociousness and about infusing that with comedy too. And so FGC has some banger ass trash talk when it comes to that. Even you could just go on YouTube and start looking up all the different trash talking and shit like that, and it's it's bangers and shit. And we don't really have that within League of Legends, and part of that too, I think, is like there's just not a lot of black culture within League of Legends itself, which we're massively fucking missing out on. But it's also that FGC is a 1v1 type scenario, right? It's just you versus the opponent, and you're directly in front of them too. So there's an opportunity for you to trash talk. But with League of Legends, one of the negative aspects of the trash talk itself is that you put pressure on your own teammates. So if you're the one trash talking, that means that now you put pressure on your teammates in order to win the match. And that might actually not do you many favors because people deal with pressure differently. Maybe you, the person trash talking, deal with pressure great, which is the whole reason of why you're trash talking to begin with. So you're influencing your teammates and saying, oh, fuck, like now I actually have to try really hard. But, maybe that might be above, the peak stress level and threshold in which they can actually bear onto them. So that's a huge negative as far as like trash talking and putting out trash talk publicly. Now, let's bring it back to another different scene that does trash talk way better than League of Legends, which is CSGO. So Stewie2K is a famous fucking trash talker within Counter-Strike. And oftentimes you'll see whenever he's in a tournament, he'll start shouting across the fucking way, and because the teams are often not facing each other. So they're like side by side and, they're facing the audience like that. So he'll often shout across the way and, talk shit. I think famously there's like this clip where he's trash talking Cold Zera, which is like one of the best players of all time in Counter-Strike Go. So like it's just classic comedy and classic like braggadociousness that you would never see in League of Legends, partly because of course we don't have those natural breaks within the commotion of the game itself, but other times just because League of Legends players don't really have that crazy of personalities. But also too, I've noticed that League of Legends, the broadcast, doesn't have these open mic segments to where they actually put in the audio of what the players are saying in between the replays. They don't really do that a whole lot. And what I would imagine is that a lot of the times when you're playing, even, naturally when you're playing solo queue or you're playing like 5v5s with your buddies, you're naturally just talking shit about the enemy regardless. So that's gotta happen on stage on the LCS as well too. Like I even had the opportunity to listen in during COVID, at the very early stages of COVID. And these players kind of were talking shit about, the other team or the other players or what they're trying to do. Most of it was actually them just calling out positions and things like that. But, sometimes you would just say like, fuck yeah, like we fucking destroyed them that time. Like, yeah, made him look like my little bitch or something, right? And like you don't actually have that within the LCS because they don't pipe in the actual audio from the players, which is something that I think is a fault of the LCS or Riot Production themselves, that they could do more to facilitate trash talk, within the entire league. But that comes with the caveat that Riot actually would then need to grow some balls and actually kind of put a maturity towards their audience themselves, right? Because in Counter-Strike, even the casters themselves will start talking about the trash talk between the different players or talking shit. Or, even better yet, in FGC, they do this famously where a player will start, bigging up the crowd or talking shit or whatever, and the casters will also talk shit with the players too, as in like, yeah, like this guy's talking that shit, like, yeah, he's laying the smackdown, whatever, and so they'll big it up as well. In League of Legends, you would never fucking see that, which is part of the reason as to why I don't think trash talk is necessarily ever going to be a thing within League of Legends. Now, of course, we have to point out the elephant in the room, which is that there are no natural breaks in the League of Legends, game state or pace. So that means naturally you aren't going to get opportunities to trash talk. But I actually think there is, like I said, the open mic situation would help alleviate that. But also too, in between games, you don't see players trash talking or talking shit to the camera, whatever. You don't ever see that. And it's kind of disappointing, right? You always see, like in classic sports, NBA or something, when somebody scores a dope score, or even in the NFL, they do a little dance or something and then show off in front of the camera. Like, you don't see that in League of Legends, and it's kind of disappointing that you don't see that. But I can also see why too, with the repercussions that usually happens on social media, or the fact that, as I said before, esports fans just don't really know how to be fans. So the biggest caveat that I'm going to give as to why I don't think we'll ever see real trash talk within League of Legends is because real beef can exist between people or players themselves, because guess what? There's limited teams to join within the LCS, or say, call it the LEC. Because guess what? Import rules exist. Versus in Counter-Strike, import rules don't exist. Right? In FGC, it's 1v1. So obviously, you don't need to worry about that. So realistically, there's only a limited number of spaces that you can join. Say if you're a mid laner, there's only a limited number of spaces that you can join. So technically, the safest bet that you would have to be able to do if you were going to trash talk anybody would be to trash talk someone that's in your same position. But, other than that, you can't really trash talk anybody else. So there's a limitation already inherently that's put in the League of Legends space, which really fucking sucks. And it really limits like how much trash talk that we can actually see, which is part of the reason as to why I think we don't see as much as we should. On top of that, obviously, teams or organizations themselves, they hold the public opinion or fan opinion in very high regard. And it's always, quoted, or I guess joked about, that Reddit actually makes the roster moves in the off season. And I think that's partially true. And so with that kind of, call it narrative, you have it to where trash talking actually has real repercussions. And I think we've largely seen that within the League of Legends space, with the likes of what I mentioned before with Jensen or Perks, or, even back in the day, Gilius is one of the probably biggest names that got fucked over by trash talking too much. And the fact that nobody wanted to pick him up because he would trash talk other players, and then obviously other players are not going to like him. But then the same thing with organizations and fans, and the fact that he would then obviously create so many enemies with fans, because the fans are the fans of the players that he started to trash talk to. So I just think overall, League of Legends is absolutely not ready for serious trash talk until the fans themselves actually change the culture of how they view trash talk, or how to view being an actual fan. So unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get the trash talk that we all think that we want, and all the drama that it, of course, creates, and all the different talking points and interesting storylines that we could actually gain from it.